Hey, is it okay to reuse old content when you think about webinars and podcasts and emails and everything else? Find out in this episode. Here we go.
Welcome to the Everything Email Podcast with Ken Countess. Ken is a world-renowned email marketing expert. He'll help you 10x your business with email strategies that generate more sales. And now, here's Ken Countess.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of the Everything Email Podcast. I'm Ken Countess. We are now heard in over 60 countries, over 600 cities around the world. So I'm glad you're here. If it's your first time, welcome. And if you've listened before, I'm glad you're back. And by the way, either way, make sure you subscribe. You can find this podcast, of course, on our website, kenisemail.com, but also on Apple Podcasts, Google, just about any place you find your podcast. Okay, let's go. I often get asked, is it okay to reuse old content? Well, I've always said yes, it is, especially if you've got content that's very popular. But I had a very unique situation happen about 2 weeks ago. By the way, I'm recording this in the middle of January of 2024. And what happened 2 weeks ago was I got COVID for the second time. And this time around was worse than the first time I had it. And I can attribute it to a few different things. I had gotten the COVID booster a few days before, then went to a party where there were about 60 people. My thinking is that, and I'm not a medical professional, but my thinking is that my immune system was depressed because it was fighting or accommodating the virus booster, the COVID booster. Then I got exposed, and so I had the double whammy of getting the virus with a depressed immune system and then the virus itself. So double whammy, I was laid up for a little bit. Nothing terribly serious, a lot of congestion, had a fever, all of those kinds of things. But what happened was it made me feel poorly enough that I wasn't able to, number one, record a podcast, and number two, do my emails the way I normally do. And so I thought, well, we have so many prior episodes of the podcast, I'll just repurpose an old one. And I went back into the archive and looked to see what the most popular sessions had been, and those were done as a reprise over the last 2 weeks. I did replay 2 of the previous podcasts. Then email. I wasn't really in the mood to be creative enough to write new emails, so I repurposed some old emails. Again, the ones that had the most opens and clicks. And then, not very long ago, in fact, just a few days ago, I had a webinar that I was doing, and it was actually the same content that I had done about a month and a half ago. And it was a very popular webinar. So thankfully, I had recorded it and replayed that webinar for a new audience. And interestingly, my assistant, someone who I've been working with for about 10 years, didn't even realize she was in the background doing all the background stuff that happens during the course of a webinar, putting links in the chat and those kinds of things. She didn't even realize until I told her that it was actually a pre-recorded event. So here's the thing. Don't be afraid to reuse old content. The reality is this. You may know that it's old content, but because if you're doing what you should be doing, growing your list and doing those kinds of things, people who had not been exposed to your content before, as far as they're concerned, it's brand new content, so you're good there. But the real thing is that people who have already been exposed to the content before, they had seen the webinar, they'd read the email. If that was something that had happened a day, a week, a month ago, there is no way that they would remember everything that you did in that email or webinar or podcast episode. So don't be afraid to reuse your previous content. You have taken a lot of time to create it. I'm sure that it's great stuff. Reuse it. Give it additional life. There is no reason in the world why you can't rerun some old content. After all, think about your TV viewing habits. You've probably watched repeat episodes of shows. You stream stuff off the web and let's say Netflix, and you may watch the same thing again and again and again. There is no reason why you can't do the same thing with the content you create. Hope that's helpful to you. Hope it saves you some time. And by the way, don't forget to join the inner circle. You'll hear a little bit more about that in just a few moments. That's it for this week. If you haven't started using email marketing, I've got a great offer for you. Go to my website. It's kenisemail.com and look at the top of the page. You'll see the best email offer up there. Check that out, and you'll automatically become a member of my inner circle. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Everything Email Podcast with Ken Countess. If you like the podcast, tell your friends and coworkers about it. Be sure to visit kenisemail.com to sign up for Ken's mailing list. You'll get great marketing tips every week in your inbox. Have questions? Send Ken an email. It's ken@kenisemail.com. See you next time.